welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. It means the world to me. Thank you very much indeed. Today, we have another return guest, and it's with great pleasure we welcome back one of the most fantastic stars in the entrepreneurial universe, one that works with top brands in the world, an innovator and leader in business, an influencer, a motivational speaker, a writer, a self-promotion expert, public speaker, and one with the key to unlocking your self-promotion and how it isn't a dirty word. It's the return of Miss Fuck Being Humble herself, Miss Stefanie Sword Williams. How are you, Steph?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me back.
No, it's a pleasure to have you back. I've been ever since our conversation this time last year. I thought I've got to get Steph back. I've got to get her back on, and we're here now. So, the first question today, first question of every returning guest, is simply, how have you been?
Yeah, really good, thank you. I am just coming off a series of travels and getting back into the work mindset. So I feel like this month has been a lot about gearing back up, and I'm feeling quite excited for the next couple of months ahead.
Yeah. So, well, what can you tell us about the next few months?
So I'm actually heading to New York next week. I'm speaking at Advertising Week, and that is something I did last year. So it's been a year now since I've been taking business out to New York. So it feels quite a monumentous trip to be back out there this time again. And I am doing a series of new workshops and launching a new product. And I'm actually working on a new big project that I don't think I can talk about just yet, but it will be coming soon to the masses.
Cool. Any small details at all?
It's something that you will be able to use forever.
We'll leave it at that. But yeah, but we look forward to that. Cool. So yeah, you mentioned there about your expansion to New York, and of course you're very vocal on social media about your growth and everything. Of course, with positive messages about self promotion and stuff. But tell me about New York. What's it like taking your brand to NYC?
So it's been really interesting. Like full disclosure, a lot of people have been like, "Is this, part one of world domination with fuck being humble?" And I was like, "Not really. No, I just really love New York, and I just want to spend more time in New York. I'm not bothered about going to. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I get to do a US book tour and travel the world or do all of these things, fabulous. But for me, I'm just really living out 16-year-old Steph's dream of like going to work in New York. The likelihood that I would move there is slim just because it's hard with visas and all of those things. So I've been looking at how can I go out every few months and build out the brand out there. And it's been amazing. Like the response has been so great. As I said, I spoke at Advertising Week last year and I was speaking at the conference. I gave 2 to 3 talks because I was part of there's like this Ad Week Learn program where there's a whole day of programming of speakers, and I gave 2 sessions in that day, and then I also spoke on one of the main stages on the Thursday that week. And just every time I saw people, they were like, "We're obsessed, we love it. Where can we buy the merch? Where can we buy the swag?" And this was before they'd even been to the session. They just loved the title. And it's been really, I guess, confidence building to take the business to another country, to another place, and it be so well received. It's also opened my eyes to see that maybe I've been building my business in the wrong place for the last 6 years because it was such an easy sell in New York, whereas the UK has obviously been a little bit more challenging, but obviously I've learned a lot having gone through the process. I always said if I could learn how to crack the UK market, everything else should be a breeze moving forward. But yeah, the response has been great. I've been out 3 times now. This will be my fourth trip in the last year. The first event was more about speaking at Advertising Week, building up some connections and doing some activations, which I know we'll talk a little bit about, but thinking really creatively about how do I get the name Fuck Being Humble talked about around the city on a very shoestring budget. I don't have millions of pounds. I don't have thousands of pounds to be spending on marketing campaigns. And I don't have a team to be rolling that out either. So, what can I do that's quite exciting, eye-catching, that would generate a buzz both in the city when I'm there, but also online when I share the content afterwards? So that's probably been the most fun part to building the brand in the US is I've been pushed to really think creatively about my self promotion beyond what I'm already doing right now. So that and obviously just meeting people. I think we can talk a little bit more about this, but I just find the energy in New York so infectious. I watched a video on TikTok recently about where is your thrive city? And it's this idea of like there's certain cities in the world that you go to and you just feel you can thrive. And New York is for sure one of them for me. It has just got this infectious, exciting, anything is possible energy. And coming from the UK, where we're quite pessimistic and quite reserved, it was such an uplifting and exciting space to be in. So I think if anything, every time I've gone to New York, I've worried that I'm exhausted, a bit tired. I don't know if I'm in. It's ignited a lot of excitement in the brand again for me, which has probably been the best output.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And tell me about the energy of New York because there's a good lead on to you had a free business advice stand. You plonked yourself down in Central Park with this big sign saying free business advice, come and have a chat. And yeah, so tell me about the energy of the place and the stories that people told you or the advice that they asked for.
Yeah, so I was trying to think about something that would grab people's attention whilst I was there. And I wanted to do something. I realized speaking on another podcast this week, so much of the great opportunities that have come my way have been by giving something out for free first and people benefiting and then something coming back. And I believe in giving good things out to the universe because it comes back as well. It's what I've been doing for the last 6 years of building Fuck Being Humble and just generally as a human. But sitting down in that square was really interesting. So a bit of context. It was actually in Washington Square Park because, and the reason I say it's Washington Square Park and not Central Park is because that park's a little bit more unusual, shall we say. You get a lot of interesting people in Washington Square Park. It's quite abstract and there's a lot of characters in there. So I went along because a friend recommended do it in Washington Square Park. It's great footfall. There's a lot of creativity there. There's like always somebody who plays the piano in the park there. Like there's a lot of
Of
vibrancy
course.
going on.
Yeah.
So I plonked myself next to the fountain with a sign that said free career advice on it with two seats. And I sat down, and the optimist in me never anticipated that there would be anything that would go wrong. And I actually had a friend there filming content for me. So she was sat on the other side of the park and kind of doing a lap of this fountain, watching me sit by myself because nobody came to sit down. And I was like, oh God, this is not working out how I thought. And the sun was shining and I felt so vulnerable and I felt so exposed. And I was like, why did I think this was going to work? This was an awful idea. What was I thinking? Like every bit of self-doubt was coming into my head. But I'd actually had quite a busy week that week running around New York doing lots of stuff. And the sun was shining. And I remember just thinking, like, just enjoy this moment. Like you're sat in a park, you've got a sign next to you that says free career advice. If people sit down next to you, great. And if they don't, just enjoy sitting in the sun and learn what this feeling is. Learn to sit in the discomfort, which I haven't felt that in a really long time. I think I'm someone who does things that I'm good at and kind of follow that path very confidently. This was something that was really, really uncomfortable.
Mm.
Anyway, at the same time, there was a man who had 100 pigeons on him. He was a bit like the woman in Home Alone who like
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
the same guy. So there was a man who, as part of his self-expression art display in the park, he had loads of pigeons all over his body, and people were stopping to take photographs of him. And I was to the side of him, and I laughed that he was getting more attention than me offering career advice. But in a way, it was almost beneficial because the first person that came and sat next to me was a street photographer who sat and had photographed the man who was covered in pigeons. And he came over and he was like, I don't really know what I need to ask, but I just thought it was interesting what you're doing. Do you want to tell me a bit more? So again, it was quite interesting because rather than someone sitting down and bearing it all, I actually had to do a bit of a self-promotion pitch first before they would open up to me. And again, kind of managing the unexpected, that was a learning curve for me as well, which is, yeah, people didn't know who I was. So why would they just open up straight away? And this photographer, told me that he was a street photographer. He was working full time at the time, but he really wanted to get more work. And he said, I think I've done everything I need to do. And I was like, well, tell me what channels you're promoting on, what's working and what's not. And eventually, what we got around to talking about was he had this website, but he wasn't really that interested in posting on social media. And the advice I gave to him is that a website is great to have, but with no traffic, no one will find it. So you have to find a way to drive people to your website, whether that's standing in the street and handing out postcards, whether it is posting on social media, whether you're hosting events or exhibitions where you drive people to your website, you have to do something to build excitement. He was like, oh, thank you so much. Like I sat down thinking I didn't really need any help, and this has been really useful. And so then, he walked off, and it was empty seat again. And I was thinking, oh gosh, is anyone going to come back? And eventually, like there was a little bit of I won't say a big queue, but there was a queue of people hovering around waiting. I had a lot of students come to me asking me about their future. How do they know if they're going to pick the right future? And my very candid and honest answer is you don't. No one ever knows whether they're picking the right future. But it was
Mm.
very interesting to see the under 25 bracket were feeling very nervous about their decisions they were making for their career, and whether what they were about to choose was going to be the thing they'd love forever. And yeah, I had to be that kind of, I guess, tough agony aunt that I always like to describe myself as, and say, you might actually hate it in 2 years' time or 5 years' time, but that's okay because we all have to go through that.
Yeah.
And there was another person who was an artist, and he really wanted to get his work out there. And he had been promoting on social media, but had been doing less of the in-person speaking to people. And part of that was coming from shame, actually, that people didn't see him as an artist, and he was struggling to convey himself as that because people didn't see him like that. And, I was able to share a similar process of becoming an author, and, me struggling with people not really understanding and recognizing that when I went through that process, that I'd changed from the person that I was when I was 16. And I've had gone on to do these great things, but people still held reservations, or maybe mindsets around who I was as an individual, and maybe not evolving with me as well. So it was an amazing day, and I did it for a few hours. I think it was about 3, 4 hours. I was sitting there, different people coming up, breaks in between. And it was probably one of my favorite days of work, like ever. It probably makes the top 10 moments. And just for so many reasons, the interactions, my personal learning of being brave in that moment, understanding that not everything's going to go how you want it to immediately. My friend did a great job of filming quite discreetly, actually. And when we shared it online, I just remember the response being so positive. And I think because I did it around February 2024,
Mm.
which the time where we were seeing mass global layoffs, we still are, to be honest, but it was definitely a low point, I think, in the employment crisis. And people were commenting like, this is so kind, this is so generous, this is so great. And it was such a simple idea that, I was almost kicking myself that I hadn't thought of it sooner. But interestingly, it was because I hadn't been looking at my self-promotion in this way of how
Mm.
do I break out in a new market, because for the last 6 years I'd been promoting to a market that I knew. So it
Mm.
was a really great activity to remind me of why we need to keep evolving and keep trying ideas and keep experimenting, even if the way you're doing new business right now, or the way you're attracting clients and work and opportunities working, doesn't mean you can't have more fun and play with different ideas to try and attract new things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of reminds me of again, you've talked about this a lot, but dealing with bad press, etc. And you said just now that you're initially thinking, I'm in this stand in Washington Park and going, Christ alive, who's gonna what do people think? I mean, your imposter syndrome and like in full flow and sort of thing. But and you mentioned there about how 6 years in the British market. I remember we spoke about last time at how fuck being humble wasn't initially well received as you'd liked it to be. Obviously, of course, you got through that, and it's you're doing fantastically well now. But I include myself in this. If you get bad press, it's very hard not to take it personally, and very hard to think, oh, like oh, everything I've done is a is a sham and everything is all awful, and I don't want to just scream and cry, and you go, okay, calm down, it's not that bad. It's just other people's opinions, and of course, as long as you believe in what you're doing and love what you're doing, then that's all that matters. So for anyone out there who would like to know a bit more about dealing with bad press, what would you say to those people?
I guess what I said when it first happened, particularly for me in the UK, was just, are they your demographic? Are they the people you're trying to target? My experience is the people that have shared negative opinions towards my business are deeply unhappy in themselves. They were never meant to be my audience group anyway.
Exactly,
They
exactly.
have not they've not been in the situations that either I've been in or my existing community has been in, and they haven't had to self-promote or they haven't had to do things that they don't feel comfortable doing. And so with that meant I have to ignore the people that don't get it and really cater to the people that do.
Yeah,
And it's been interesting because although I had some negative responses at the beginning, there was still from the outset a lot of supporters, lots of people instantly loved the message. So I think you're always going to come up against people who are not sure. They're not sure if they vibe you, they're not sure if they vibe your message, they're not sure if they want to participate, and that's okay. Like I physically couldn't cater to everyone. And actually, like that's more important to remember. Like, imagine if everybody was obsessed, and imagine if everyone loved every single part. I wouldn't have had all the personal and life experiences I've had over the last 6 years because my life would be controlled by this business, right? So in
mm,
hindsight, there's actually a benefit from not pleasing everyone. And it also means you don't serve up quite generic plain content. Someone I was speaking to about this is like, we're so cautious that we need to please everyone that actually what we share ends up being quite boring. And so when
yeah.
you are comfortable with knowing you might not please everyone, then you are able to say things more confidently and more disrupting. And that has a bigger, more exciting effect.
Yeah, I mean, was there like a specific moment or like a particular launch or like either when you launched the book or a certain talk or like one moment where you just thought where you really sort of stepped into like your power and like and all those and you took back all these feelings of wanting to please people and everything was a kind of one moment which you look back on now where you thought that's the moment where I started looking forward and believing in myself 100%. And whatever anyone says about me from now on, it doesn't matter.
I think it was my third event, which was about 6 months into running Fuck Being Humble, where 180 people came. And it was so busy. And I remember being like, whoa, like looking around the room, being like, this is a lot. This is word of mouth. And I remember thinking, like, this is just me marketing without advertising, without big budgets or anything like that. This is resonating with people. And so for everyone it doesn't resonate with, that's absolutely fine. But if there's this many people in this room in this short amount of time,
Mhm.
and this side hustle as well, it wasn't my full-time business, so I wasn't giving my 100% to this, then I knew I'd found a tribe or a group of people that really wanted and needed this support. So I think that was definitely the early point. And now I think it's about for me personally, it's every time I get tagged in a post where someone says, taking inspiration from Fuck Being Humble and sharing this. And it's just like, yeah, like that has become, it is a phrase that people say to themselves. It is a phrase that people say to others. And it is a phrase that people want to advocate when I'm not there. And that just shows me that it has an emotional connection with people beyond what any critic might say. Is if people love it enough to repeat it for you and advocate for you, then that is enough. Like that is more than enough for me. And it's
Yeah.
been a really interesting process. This new project I mentioned, I've been looking at, when is enough enough? We're always striving for more, we're always looking for more. That question of when is enough enough is something I think we need to keep asking ourselves because we were talking about it before the podcast started about like enjoying the journey is as important as getting to that high point because you get to that high point and then you go, oh, what's next?
Mm.
And you realize you've been overlooking how much you could have enjoyed that process because you were just focused on the end goal. So yeah, I think for me it's seeing 6 years on just how many people are discovering, enjoying, repeating, and promoting the brand for me. And that continues to be a reason why I love doing what I do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You talked about how breaking into markets and stuff. Now, forgive me if you've talked about this before, but what exactly do you mean by breaking into a market? What does that mean as such?
So entering any market wherever it is, right? So for me, I started the business in England, in the UK.
Hmm.
And that really, if I look back now, was about proximity and it being easy. Because if I looked at the business plan now with the knowledge that I have, there's no way I'd have started my company in the UK because they're actually not the right market for it. Although there's a need for it, I would have taken the business to the US straight away if I really assessed it now, because there would have been a quicker adoption of the idea and the brand,
Yeah.
and it would have taken less energy, time, resources, and all of those things. So when I talk about entering markets, about where your audiences are, who are you going after and where? And as I say, I think I could have possibly excelled quicker in the US, although the difficult thing to assess really is maybe the reason that it had such success in the UK was because it was so disrupted and there was few messages like it, whereas in the US they are more prone to self-promoting, so it may not have been as newsworthy. So it's a balancing act. I think for me as a founder, I see great excitement in growing the business in the US because it feels less effort. If I'm really honest, it feels less effort. It doesn't feel like I have to spend 50% of my time convincing people this is important before I even get in the room.
Yeah.
They all of them were like, oh, I get it. No, I love it. Just tell me how I need to do it. And what I found interesting in the US market was they all think they're going to make it. It's this it's delusional confidence, right? And I think we need more of it across the world. Everyone was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start a TED talk, I'm going to do a podcast, and they were just like, yeah, I'm doing all of this, do you want to come with me and join me on my journey? If not, I'll see you later. It was just so refreshing. And I think in the UK we won't even speak about our ambitions in case they don't happen. Like it's better to keep them in private and have
Yeah.
no to reach them than it is to say them and not make it. Whereas in the US, it's like if you don't say it, you're the fool, actually. And I kind of liked that outlook because it just meant that everybody was a lot more transparent, they were a lot more open. It felt like I could be as well. When I was meeting people, I'd be saying, I've been building a business in the UK, but I'm really trying to meet more people in the US. Are there any businesses or brands that you'd recommend me to? And they're like, oh my God, let me introduce you to da da da. And people were just introducing me to people on the spot. Whereas in the UK, I have like colleagues or people in my network that I wouldn't dare asking for introduction because we're so guarded and we're so private and we're so like, well, I got this, we're so protective. Whereas the US, there's this abundance mindset, and I don't know if it's about this like go to New York and live the American dream, and maybe that's a blessing and a curse as well. I don't always think that's great because I think a lot of people go there and don't reach those dreams, but there's definitely an openness and a optimistic mindset that there's room for all of us to succeed and
Mm.
we're all to make it. And that's what I am enjoying the most. And that's why I think the brand Fuck Being Humble works really well there, is because everybody is really open and they want to. So what I found the difference is what they need help with is when I said I'm a TEDx speaker, Forbes under 30, they're like, oh, cool. How did you get those things? They're not embarrassed to say they want to have those things. They just want to know the key steps that I took to get there. So whereas in the UK, it's like, oh, convince me I should do this. In the US, it's tell me your secrets and how you got there.
Yeah, the more you talk about it, it shows that fuck being humble and the American market just go completely hand in hand. And then I could see you going to like these big like parties and stuff afterwards, and everyone's just rushing up to you, going, "It's like, oh my God, Stefanie, you're like awesome," and then everyone's just like printing fuck being humble all around the walls and everything, and you're going, you know, I could just see you going, finally, I'm with my people, and that's. Yeah, I think it's great because I think, and again, we mentioned, I think earlier about how like here in the UK, we're kind of like, we want to keep everything in. We don't really want to talk about things. But one thing I've learned is just it's okay to talk about things and have ambitions, because there's a phrase over here that people go, well, famous last words. And people go like,
Yeah, that's such a good point.
yeah, and people go, oh, but you said you were going to do this. You said you were going to do that. Where are you now? You said, where's that big dream you were chasing? And then, it's very
I've
Brit.
never thought about that. That's such a good point, isn't it? It's such a diminishing phrase because it's like we're trying to catch you out from what you said you wanted to do, and
Mm,
we're quite ready to do that, which is quite a sad thing, isn't it,
it
really?
is. Yeah.
I'd rather shame you than cheerlead you on. Like that's quite a sad phrase that we have that we're known for.
Yeah, yeah, because again, you talked about we're Brits, we're allowed to say it. There's a lot of pessimism about us, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Like for example, like I would say, I've got this podcast. I'm an actor. I'm going to give it a go. It's my lifelong journey. It's nature of the beast. Some years are quiet, some years might be very busy. You never know what the future holds. None of us freaking do, but there's always that feeling of like, well, got to consider lodging, got to consider your economic security. And it's like, and yes, that's right, and it's important, but it's become more like like you, like you grow, like you blow up your balloon of dreams, and of course, like it's a very precious balloon, and of course you keep it safe. It's a weird example, but just bear with me. But then someone will come across with this pin and just go, and then all of a sudden, and that pin is called pessimism and not wanting you to succeed and everything. And yeah, like you say, it's a very sad thing that we do have. And I think we've got to, and that's why brands like your one is here to change that and say, yeah, it's, obviously don't be a dick about it, but also be confident in what you're doing, and that's what it's all about. And that's a really good lead on to, you gave a talk in Porto recently, and this is a quote from one of your Instagram stories that really resonated with me, and which says, "Just because people aren't vocal doesn't mean they're not impressed." Explain.
So I have a lot of people that come up to me and say, "Oh, I've been following your content on LinkedIn for years. I love your journey." And I laugh in my head and think, well, that's funny because you've never liked it. You've never liked it, you've never commented on it, you've never engaged it. And
Yeah,
it
yeah,
really
yeah.
came off the back of a post I did earlier this year called Don't Be an Online Lurker. Because I think there's a lot of people who lurk in the background. They're watching what you do. When you see them at the next event you go to, they're like, oh, I saw you did that. And you're like, so why
Did
didn't you
you? Yeah.
why don't you drop me a text and say well done? Like what is this weird vibe? And I guess I did that post to kind of call out those people to be like, I don't think you realize how courageous it is for people to step into what it is they really care about, to put things out there. So if you are remotely impressed, if you are like even in the slightest enjoying their content or something, just like it, comment on it, share it, recommend it, do something to support because you never know when you might be in the same situation and you will be absolutely in bits if somebody else is being an online lurker to you. So I did that post and then I realized that a lot of people actually commented on that post and was like, oh, hands up, I'm an online lurker. We'll be more active now. I think what you're doing is amazing. And it was really interesting because obviously I wasn't doing it to be like, everyone tell me I'm amazing. Everyone who's
Yeah,
not
sure.
commenting on my content, tell me how great I am. But it was really interesting how many people came through and was like, oh, by the way, that's me, and I'm sorry, and I'll make a better effort. And that was the point of the post to encourage people to reflect on their behaviors and how they are or are not supporting people. But at the same time, it made me realize that there's a lot of people that are watching, and actually, in their defense, we can't expect people to have the same communication styles as we do. And I've
Mhm.
been looking a lot about like love languages, love languages and relationships, are you um someone who cares about physical touch? Do you prefer gifting? Do you like words of affirmation? And
Yeah.
I think the same happens in our career. I think we need to understand that not everyone has the same love languages in the workspace in the career. So whilst you might appreciate words of affirmation and giving words of affirmation and receiving words of affirmation, some people might not, right? And so it was a bit of a double-sided message of I'd like to encourage more people to be vocal if they're enjoying what they see and the people that they celebrate. But likewise, it was a learning that we can't expect everyone to have the same communication style as us. So just because people aren't liking and aren't commenting doesn't mean they're not impressed. And part of that as well is coming from the fact I noticed that, I launched a course on changing careers. A lot of people saved it down. Not a lot of people liked and commented it. And
Hmm.
part of that is because they probably don't want to be seen to be downloading or commenting or liking a changing careers course, right? Does
Oh
that
dear.
mean I shouldn't launch that? No, of course it doesn't,
No,
because
no, no, no.
it's about understanding the reasons why. There's some things that I share that some people would be happy to be seen supporting. And there's some people who are like, will DM me privately and say, "Oh my God, I loved your post today. That really hit my soul, blah, blah." And I think, well, why didn't you like and comment on it? Like part of building my business is having an engaged audience in order to get brand partnerships and all these things. But what I've realized is not everybody feels comfortable engaging in that way. So you really just can't measure your success on the external validation that you get. It's really important to be measuring it on metrics like, did your event sell tickets? Did your event drive people to it? Did you sell the product of your course? Did you get more people messaging you saying, "Oh my God, I love that podcast episode"? Like, what are the things that you can measure that isn't about that external validation? Because actually there's a whole load of people, and there's people that say, "Oh, I've been pitching you on projects all year this year." And I'm like, that's so weird, because we've been at events together and you don't come speak to me, and
Mhm.
all of these things. And there could be a mixture of reasons. It could be that I'm quite a confident person and they might feel introverted and they don't love having small talk in public spaces. There's lots of reasons why people might not vocally and visually show their support. And there may be also the reasons that they're just not great people and they just don't want to support you, and that's also fine. But
Yeah.
it should be the reason you stop backing yourself, is the point.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's a good lean on to, and I've asked this question to a few people recently. You've been in business like for a long time and everything. Would I be fair in saying that you've worked with some people who you've not liked at all?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what? Yeah. I said that to someone in the pub the other night, and it's just like, so in your years of business, have you ever worked with someone you haven't liked? And he was like, yeah, every day.
And I wouldn't say it's interesting. When I worked full time, I didn't love
Okay.
everyone I worked with naturally.
Yeah.
What I would say is, and I noticed this recently, I worked with a client who there was an issue with timings and they didn't give me much flex on providing something. And I actually felt really frustrated, and I had a part to play in that experience. But what I didn't like was their lack of flexibility. And I think this year I've been through some personal things where I've really needed people to be flexible. And if you're not flexible, then I don't actually want to work with you as a
Yeah.
client. So I think what I am very fortunate is that I either spot the people straight away and think, we're not going to work together again. I don't need you and I don't want to work with you. Or if I do, I'm able to not have this as an ongoing, commitment that I've made. But definitely when I worked with full time, there were people that I didn't obviously love, and that's just part of work, really.
Yeah, and again, I feel like we always come back to the same point, which is to say, even if you work with someone you don't like, you just got to like block them out, or say, well, obviously be, if you've got to work with them, you kill them with kindness and you be professional and stuff. But it's important not to like just don't let them get under your skin in any way, and just finding that ability to just keep pushing yourself forward and just say, look, you don't need, if someone doesn't like you, and that's fine. That's fine. You just keep going forward and stuff. But what would you say to people who are working with people who they secretly don't like in the workplace 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or whatever it is? What would you say to them?
It's really interesting. I've been doing some research on this topic recently, and something that really stood out to me was a career coach who runs Slick Pivot.
Hmm.
She's a brilliant coach, and she talks about why we need to change our beliefs around a situation. And I wish I'd have heard from her years ago, because it would have helped me so much. If we believe and we tell ourselves our boss is toxic, or there's someone in our office that's so arrogant, they love themselves and they just only ever want to talk about themselves, then that's what we will experience and that's how we will see them.
Hmm.
We're choosing to place a narrative on someone that it may be true, but it's actually not helping us work with them. And so, if we want to find better ways to work with people, we have to change our beliefs or at least put a bit of a counter narrative. So, this person is toxic, but what I can see is they're really stressed themselves. They get a lot of pressure put on them. They are going through a divorce right now and they're actually really struggling in themselves. And all of a sudden, your understanding of why they may be like that changes slightly. And she just, this penny drop moment happened for me where it's like, all I've ever done in my career when I didn't like people was choose to create a set of beliefs about who I think they were and what I think their objectives were or what I thought their end goal was. And it didn't serve me. And every day I'd be bitter and I'd be angry and I'd be resentful that they were in the office. And actually, if I look back now and I could have said, you know what? I think my boss is trying to claim my work, and that's really frustrating for me. But I also can understand that the reason she might be doing that is because as a woman, you get pushed out of the industry, and she's trying to do her best to hold her place. So I can believe that, it's not great that she's claiming my work, but I also believe in equality in the workplace. And actually, I can see she's not being fairly treated in that way.
Mm.
And so, again, much easier said than done. It takes a lot of empathy to do that, but it's a healthier place to be.
Mm.
Do you want to be angry, resentful, and bitter, or do you want to be empathetic, understanding, and more collaborative and cooperative? Like, is the story you're choosing to believe about the person helping you or hindering you?
Yeah, uh, perfectly put. I think that's another good lead on to. It's one of my favorite quotes of yours, actually, in the book, actually, which is, "You don't owe anger anything." And there's a bit in the book I just want to read out again for you, if you don't mind. If I can find it. Okay. So this is like a couple of quotes from a few pages. So I've just bear with me. So Steph writes on page 165. She goes, "Most importantly, do not neglect anger. Tackle it head on and get to the root of the issue. By ignoring the symptoms, you can and most likely will become bitter towards the trigger, whether it be a person or a situation. It might continue to be a sore spot for the rest of your life, and you'll risk reacting more sensitively to it later on due to the culmination of years carrying the anger around. Yes, you are allowed to be angry, but it's what you do with that anger that helps you to remove it from your life." A few pages on, "Don't let anger hold you down. You don't owe it a single thing, and it won't help you in the long run. Trust me." And over the page, finally, "If I ever hear similar stories from close friends, I urge them to leave the situation if there's no hope of progress. We're talking about your mental health here. You and your future are the priority. Whether you've been working for 2 weeks, 4 months, or just over a year, don't worry about how it reflects on you. Worry about how much your confidence could erode if you stay a day longer. The vital thing is to make sure that other people's intimidation and lack of control doesn't affect your long-term goals or the courage you need to find another place to thrive." And I guess going back to that word thrive earlier. But yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, just how it's your mental health at the end of the day. It's you looking after yourself, and you don't owe anger anything. So let's talk a bit more about that phrase. You don't owe anger anything.
Yeah, I think when I wrote that book, what I was definitely referencing in my own experience was I had this really, really toxic boss, and he would swear at us. He would say, "You're not worth the air I breathe." He would literally like scream it. Like I remember getting in a car with him, and he was driving down the motorway so irresponsibly,
Mm,
screaming in my face, and because I hadn't bound the document properly together, and he was just
really?
like, "You're an embarrassment." Like it was, I actually felt scared for my life in that situation. Like it was really dangerous situation.
Mm,
And he was a complex person, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt time and time again. In the time that I was there, I watched five people come and go in 11 months.
wow.
Um, it was really interesting how many people wasn't going to stand for it, didn't stand for it. And I was 11 months out of graduation. It was my first ever job. And, wasn't the best advice at the time, but I was getting advice at the time. Oh, you can't leave a job earlier than a year because people won't trust you, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, I was honestly coming, definitely every weekend I was crying. Sunday scaries were beyond belief.
Yeah.
At least 2 to 3 times a week, I was crying. And I like to think I'm quite a resilient person. Like prior to that point, I'd experienced things that I knew I had strong resilience, but this really was unfathomable the way I was being treated. And there was no HR department, which was a massive red flag alert.
That's
So I
unusual.
think in that, it was like I was really angry. I was really upset. I was, yeah, angry that I'd taken this opportunity. I was angry at them. I was angry at him. There were so many things. And eventually, the reason I said about that eroding thing is, had I have stayed past the 11 months, I would have been a shell of a human. Like I would have lost all ounces of confidence. I would have doubted myself. I wouldn't have been able to get out of there because he had a bit of a brainwashing approach of like
Mm.
making you feel so bad about yourself that it would make you believe it. And that is why I'm so kind of protective of people to say that, if it is risking your mental health, then no job is worth that. And, I have a lot of corporate clients and I'm sure they don't appreciate me saying that, but I care more about the individual at the end of the day, and no job is worth sacrificing your well-being over. I think what we do need to be mindful of is there's a conversation around boundaries and there's a conversation around being treated well in the workplace. And what I think we have to be mindful of is what I went through was toxic bullying, narcissistic, unlivable and unworkable environment. Like it was not okay. But I do feel there is a sensitivity around being rejected, and there's a sensitivity about being told you have to work late or you have to work through your lunch, and there's things like that, which
Yeah.
we have to understand is part of working, right? So I share all of this to say is don't let anger hold you back. Absolutely not. If you find yourself being so angry, not showing up as the person you want to be, not showing up as your best self because of the situation you're in, and you've tried multiple ways to solve it and it can't be solved, then no, I don't think you should stay in that exact situation. That might be moving departments, that might be having conversations with other people, might be talking about things that can be changed. But if you've tried everything and you can't change it, then no job is worth losing your, mental health on. What I would say is there is a lot of feedback I'm getting from my clients that there's a lack of resilience in the workplace. There is a lack of rejection, or there is a lot of rejection sensitivity, and people are using the words boundaries to be very strict. And so, yes, it's good to have boundaries to say, I avoid working past 6 o'clock most nights because I really want to spend time with my children. That's great. But it's unreasonable to assume that that will be the case every single day, because there might be times you have to work that hour late to get that thing done or whatever it may be. And I think that's where we have to tread carefully on. I want to empower individuals to make sure that they make the right decisions for themselves, for how they can feel and enjoy work. But at the same time, there's a relationship you're having with the workplace, which is I'm here to help reach business goals, to help reach business results. And if you are too boundaried and too strict, then you might not get the same opportunities and you might not see that progression at the same rate. So
Yeah.
I share all of it now with a bit of hindsight looking back of when I wrote the book. I was definitely writing it from a place of I went through this awful situation and I don't want anyone to go through that. And I still stand by that. But what we do need to understand is that work is like a relationship. If a friend turns up late to meet up with you once, you don't bin them off and set your boundaries and say, I'm never going to be friends with you again. And the same with work, if work asks you to work late, you don't go, how dare you? This is it, I'm out of here. I knew you were going to take the mic. Like, there's no point. You want to make that relationship work. So you have to think about how do I make this work on my terms, right? So that would be the only thing I'd say is I want everybody to enjoy their work, but I also want them to be mindful of how they have to work in collaboration with companies and your bosses and your teams to get the best results, as
Yeah.
opposed to being so boundary that you actually do look like someone who is not very adaptable and is not open to being flexible, because that's when it starts to go against your profile and your reputation. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I did that well, but
No,
I
no,
hope
no. That was
listeners
brilliant.
understand that.
No, no, no. That was brilliant. No, every word was fantastic. No, I really learned from that. Thank you. If I may ask, how long did you stay in that job?
So it was 11 months in total.
Oh, 11
But
months. Okay.
in the first few months, I knew it was not good.
Okay.
And it was a shame, because on the good days, it was good in the sense that like I learned a lot. And actually, I hosted workshops then in my first job. I
Yeah.
got to learn about like strategy and brand storytelling. It was really what I loved doing. And that, I think that was also why I stayed for longer, but it's because the type of work I was doing was really enjoyable. I had a lot of autonomy. I could do different things, but it was just married up with such toxic behavior that was, yeah, just too unavoidable. I wouldn't do it now. And what's interesting is the minute I spotted that behavior in any job I went into next, I was a serial job hopper. I think we spoke about this last time. I moved jobs regularly. I don't feel any shame or guilt around that.
Yeah.
But part of that was because I'd been treated so badly in my first job that I wasn't going to stick around to watch the same behaviors unfold.
Mm.
That being said, I probably could have stuck around in certain jobs longer and gave them more of a chance. But I think each decision was about respecting myself and having self-respect, and it led on to great opportunities and great things. So I don't regret the decisions I made to move. And every time it was because I valued myself and my well-being more than I did taking other people's crap that was eventually going to damage how I saw myself.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that. No, that's absolutely spot on. I think that's a really good way of just saying, ultimately, like we said before, you just have to, your mental health comes first. And ultimately, if a situation does get really bad, like you said, after 11 months, you thought, no, I can't do this anymore. And then you move on, there'll be other opportunities and stuff. And there's a phrase that I've learned over the last few years, which really kind of stuck with me, which is your money will return, your time won't. So ultimately, there'll be plenty of opportunities to work. There'll be plenty of things to do to get money. There's no doubt. We're quite lucky in that respect. But the time that you spend won't come back. And make sure that you're using the best time for yourself. Obviously, you've got security and all that. But that aside, make sure you're looking after yourself first and make sure that you're around good people. And another lesson, I'm sure you've talked about this as well in your big speeches and stuff, which is surround yourself with the right people. Surround your circle's got to be supportive. If you're around people who essentially don't care, then you're gonna, yeah, it's just not gonna work. So that's the important thing there. I know we're pushed for time, Steph, but I just got a few more questions for you left. Now I've tried to phrase this question in a right way. I think I know what I want to say to you. I'm just going to throw this out there and just see. Hopefully, it'll make sense. So the question is, what's been some of the things that you've talked about a lot that you haven't been asked about until now?
So what's some of the things
Yeah, I
that
know
I
that.
do a lot? Go
Yeah,
on, give me an example. Let's talk this
I,
through.
yeah, I wrote it down thinking it makes sense. Now I've just said it out loud. It doesn't. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is like, what's been like some of the things that you've spoken about in a lot of detail or written about in a lot of detail that people haven't asked you about until now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some areas that when people speak to me, one of the key things that people speak to me about is self-promotion and generally making more money. They're kind of two areas that people are very motivated by. And I think if there was an area that I would recommend people spend more time looking at, or I could speak more about, probably would be the relationship building and networking side of things. I know we spoke about it in the last episode,
Yeah,
but I think it's such, when the more I think about my personal success, the more it has come down to the strengths of the relationships I have with people and my ability to build strong relationships with people. I was at a conference recently and I got to meet all the speakers 3 days in advance. And I really noticed how able I was to form individual connections with everyone because I enjoy connecting with people. I observe people's behaviors. I remember things. I take note. I truly show an interest in people. And how that differed to some of the other people's approaches to connecting with other people. And I think when I look back now, like so much of my ability to attract opportunities or work or things to my orbit and my world is through relationships. It's through communication, it's through language, it's through the way we connect with others as much as it is about advocating for ourselves. So, a great example of this. So, I observed somebody who was very good at self promotion, but was lacking a lot in those behavioral and emotional intelligence skills to connect with others.
Hmm.
So it felt like the conversation was dominated by them. It lacked humility, which is something I say, there's a way to self promote, but a way to do it with humility.
Yeah.
It lacked a genuine and authentic approach. And as a result, I could see people were not connecting with this person as well.
Yeah.
And so I can teach you everything to do with self promotion. But if you don't know those skills to read, understand, include, encourage, and inspire people,
Mm.
self promotion is not going to land. So I think
Mm.
that's one area I would recommend people looked more into, and I guess I would love to speak more about is your self promotion will go down in the pan if you don't actually know how to make other people feel seen. And that's probably this part of the secret to my success has been a big focus was fuck being humble was always how do I spotlight other people? How do I make other people feel supported and cheerleaded? And it's part of my personality type. I did the personality test, and I'm a cheerleader. And I'm a campaigner. So I like to campaign for things, I like to campaign for others. I like to push people in that direction and be like, yeah, I'll come to your first ever event. In fact, let me help you plan it because I know you're going to kill it. Let me,
Yeah.
and I see people's faces being like, you do that. And I'm like, of course I will. Like I've been helping you for ages. Let me do this. And I think what we overlook is that like we're focusing so much on our personal success, which I want people to focus on. It's fuck being humble. But at
Yeah.
the same time, the results that come are not just from how good you are at speaking it yourself. It's as important to build those relationships.
Yeah. And speaking of communication, actually, you've launched recently a new public speaking sort of, he said company there, but you're one-on-one coaching for public speaking or for people who want to pitch their brands, want to get more confident speaking in public. And yeah, how's that going so far?
Yeah, really good. So I have helped 18 people. So the doors were originally only open to 15, but a few people got in touch and wanted to work with me after the doors had closed. But
Hmm.
it's been really interesting. I've loved doing it. So the insight was born out of the fact that so many people were coming up to me saying, I'd love to speak on stages. I'd love to have a message like yours. I'd love to share something really exciting. And I kept having that. People kept coming up to me at the end of events and saying that. And so I actually shared a post on this on Instagram saying the reason this was a success was because I didn't just come up with this and then try and sell it. People had told me they wanted it and I made a product around it. So I knew I wanted to try and help people get stage ready is the title.
Hmm.
And so that looks like 2 sessions. You get 2 1-hour sessions with me. In the first 1 hour, we look at your goals, your ambitions, and we start plotting out what that talk could look like together. We brainstorm a structure. The individual then goes away, makes their talk, and then they come back in the second session and they practice it with their presentation slides on me. So they get live feedback. What's been amazing is how many people have told me that it's helped their business. It's gone way beyond just a speech. They've relooked at their entire messaging, their business model, the way that they're communicating on social media, their marketing strategies. So everyone has been like, you undersold this. They were like, this is so much bigger than what, which I guess before I sell it, I can't
Yeah.
understand how it's going to help people.
Yeah. It's like a trial period, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's been so nice to see how many people have found it beneficial to work with me and have that break in between as well. You know, we do that first session, we get you all excited, you go away and do the homework, and we have that check-in, which a lot of one-on-one sessions, it's like one and done, or it's a whole year working together. But really with this, it was like I think you can do this in a 4-week window. And within 4 weeks, people have got a keynote speech that they can go and present. You know, a lot of people could drag that out over a year. And
Mm.
I'm like, no, let's get this done in the first hour that we work. So what I've loved the most is definitely the transformation piece. When I deliver a talk to people, people will come up to me and be like, that was amazing, that was inspiring. But I don't get to watch them go implement that change. I just hope that they're doing it. And sometimes they message me and let me know. Whereas with this one, I'm literally watching on the first call people going from, I don't think I've got a story, to, oh my God, I can't wait to present this and practice it, to in the 4 weeks later presenting something that is now going to help transform their business and their sales and their reach. And it's like, that's pretty cool to be affecting people's lives on that individual positive way at such a scale. It's like one of those pivotal parts of their business that they've just unlocked, that they got to do with Fuck Being Humble, and that's what I'm really enjoying.
Yeah. So do you think will it be more than 18 clients going forward?
Yeah, I'm about to open the doors again, and it's been interestingly as well, which I like to speak quite openly about. This year's been quite weird with budgets with companies. They've been quite inconsistent. I think decision makers are less confident. There's been a lot of change, and what's been interesting is there were a big group of people who just signed up straight away because they love Fuck Being Humble, and they're like, I see you, I respect you, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, fab, that's great. And then the people that needed a little bit more nurturing or nudging, they'd send me a message, say, I'm really interested about this, but I'm worried about this. And I'd send a few messages back, maybe a voice note, and then they'd buy. And it was quite an easy process, or easier, because what was interesting was they were giving me the feedback on what was stopping them from buying.
Mm.
Whereas with corporates and with businesses and with clients, sometimes they just go, oh, sorry, not now. And you're like, oh, right, where does that leave me? Or they ghost you, or you don't hear back for a few months, or whatever it is. And you start to doubt yourself.
Mm.
Whereas with this, it was like, what I don't have to go through 10 rounds of approval. This doesn't have to get signed off by a CEO, a finance director, and didn't have to go through multiple people. It's about emotional connection and trust. Do people trust that I can help them with this? Sending voice notes is what I do all the time. So if that's a form of sales, then I think I found my version, because sending those personalized voice notes to say, oh no, I understand your story. Why don't we do the sessions like this instead? And people are like, yeah, that would be great. I've got another question though, and I'd reply over voice notes. So they were getting that building of trust before we even started working together. Whereas often when we pitch ourselves to clients, it's one pitch in an hour and they've got to make a decision on that. Whereas I was getting to nurture that, and I converted almost everybody that had a worry that they couldn't do it or they shouldn't do it, because they just needed a little nudge. So even from business sense, it was an enjoyable process, because it showed me this, that converting people doesn't have to feel like icky, and it doesn't have to feel like, oh, I've got to follow up, I've got to chase up. Instead, it was a conversation, and I actually really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, so completely natural and just like natural flowing conversation rather than being like sort of regimented kind of business all the time, which is great. And actually, one thing I love about your speeches is that they do feel natural. It flows. You know what you're talking about. So, and yeah, I think lots of people are really going to get a lot of good advice and a lot of great things from you. So if anyone, so when the doors open again, well, first of all, when do the doors open again, and where can people sign up?
In the next week, they're going to be opened again. So
Oh, there you
people
go.
are, I'm going to be doing them right through to the end of the year, because I've been really enjoying it. I would say there's been a majority focus on women, but if there's any men that want to, I'm more than happy. Like everyone, all gender is welcome. But for me, it's been a really enjoyable process getting to help and support people amplify their story, which was what Fuck Being Humble was always about from the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I've just got two more questions for you, Steph, and then we can finish up. So the first one is, so you've been with Fuck Being Humble now for a very long time. You've grown it, and it's going to continue to grow from strength to strength. We've still got so many more things to talk about. This conversation will continue in the future. But specifically in the past 12 months, what would you say were some of the lessons that your company has given you in this past 12 months?
So as mentioned, I've been dealing with some stuff personally behind the scenes for
Yeah.
the last year actually, and it has been difficult. And I guess a few things. If you don't have capacity, you don't have capacity. And the capacity has been a word that has really come into my business discussion this year, which has been we can often say we don't have time and we can often say we're too busy, but there are some days where you may not physically, mentally, and emotionally have the capacity to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And it's okay to let people know that and explain to them where you're at. This has to be postponed, it has to be reorganized, whatever it is, and to not pressure yourself to overproduce during those periods and to be kind to yourself. Have people around you that are understanding of all sides of you, that are able to cheerlead you and get really excited and support you when you are selling your products and you're doing great, but also the ones that can literally look through your eyes and go, you're not okay,
Mm.
and to pull back. And I'm going to help you with how to do that because that's been so helpful. I did a video this year saying, on the days I can, I will, and on the days I can't, I won't give up. And I think that was a really
That's a good one.
helpful reminder for me to not feel like just because I can't do things, it's me deteriorating or it's me falling behind or anything like that. I just need to keep that mindset that I can keep going and I will reconnect with that version of myself. It's just not right now. And even on your worst days, you'll be just surprised the energy you can pull out. So there were a couple of event engagements that I didn't feel comfortable backing out of, not because of the organizers, just my own sort of integrity and that I had confirmed that I would do this.
Yeah.
And so there have been a few speeches this year that you wouldn't know, but I was going through the most difficult time of my life.
Okay.
And I was delivering them, holding back tears, but at the same time being like, whoa, you are so much stronger than you think. Like
Exactly.
going from not being able to like get out of bed to then standing on a stage to 350 people, inspiring them, staying afterwards, speaking to them, chatting to them, high energy, and then coming home and reflecting and being like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that,
Mm.
was in a weird way so like strength and confidence building because when you're not in a great mindset, you can really feel like you can't do things. And in some situations, I did push myself through that mindset. And I remember it wasn't, I was holding back tears that I was upset. I was holding back like tears of pride that I had managed to muster up this energy. I was still holding my own. And I look back and they were not only would the audience not have known, but were some of my best speeches I've ever given.
Mm.
And it is crazy to me to think that actually that on my lowest days I was able to give my best version. So I think it's definitely opened my eyes to like that inner strength that I have and that you can work through things, that saying this time will pass, it will pass, but at the same time it might also come back. And that it's just learning to work with that and learning that work isn't the everything.
Mm.
I really love my job. I love it to pieces. It is my identity. I don't know if that's a healthy thing or not. And I'm going through a journey at the moment to look at if it collapsed or got cancelled or tomorrow it went, what is the version of me without it? And I think that's one of the lessons I'm learning this year is that when you can't work for whatever reason that might be, what is the version that fills you up? What
Mm.
is your identity and what do you want to explore and what gives you happiness and hope and joy? And how can I make sure that I don't let work be the only version of me?
Yeah. Brilliant. And like just very quickly, it's important to like recharge and stuff. I know you did you posted about you did a little solo trip to Seville and stuff just to take a little break. I mean, that must have been just perfect. Just take some time out, recharge and everything. So it must have been a great experience, right?
Yeah, I've been doing solo trips for the last few years. I have found it to be so helpful. I love going on holiday and I don't want to wait for other people to tell me what to do or don't have holiday available. So I'm not going to miss out on that. Summer is my quiet period anyway. So as long as I financially account for that throughout the year, I add in a budget for a holiday and I go work remotely. And it usually consists of booking a hotel with a rooftop pool that has a parasol that I can sit and do some writing or create some content or do some one-to-one calls. And then I can sunbathe for half an hour. And then I can do some work. And then I can sunbathe for half an hour. And I have been working on this special project that I did more in 6 days than I've been able to do in 6 months.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, I didn't have the capacity. So, as I was saying, I was so stretched across everything else, mentally, emotionally, and physically, that until I created that literal location separation and took myself out of the country, cleared my diary and really created that, only then could I let that thing flow. And I was really in my flow state. And I remember someone saying that they had, um, it was a different example, but someone had said they had written a book in like 3 days. I remember thinking, how crazy is that? Who would do that
Three
to themselves?
days.
And then I did this, I was working on this project when I was away, and I was like, oh, okay, I get what they mean. Is that like when you create space in a short period of time and you dedicate time to just tackle that thing and nothing else distracts you, so much can be unlocked. So yeah, again, it was a confidence building activity was to go on a solo trip to Spain because until that point, I was telling myself I couldn't do this thing.
Mm.
And I was really in my head and I was drowning a bit and I needed that separation. So yes, it was great to get a tan. I love Spanish food. It was nice to have a break, but it reset me, recharged me, it filled me with confidence again. The people that are reviewing the project were like, this is great, this is the best you've done all year, sort of thing. So it was just, yeah, I would highly recommend solo trips. And if nothing else, what's so lovely about them is you're making decisions for yourself only.
Mm.
So on the first night I got there, and I'd got there quite late because the flight was delayed and all of these things. And old me, or if I was with someone else, I'd be like, oh, we need to go out for dinner, and I need to make such a fuss. And actually, I just ordered room service and watched Sex in the City because I just wanted to do that. And what I love about solo trips is it's the one time you really just make decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, you get up when you want, you stay in the sun for as long as you want, you do work when you want. And, sometimes I'd have this brainwave at 10 o'clock at night and I'd start working at 10 till 1 a.m. And it was like, why not? Right? Because
Yeah.
that's what you can do.
Yeah.
So the freedom to go on solo trips is just good for the soul in all accounts.
Yeah. Yeah. I can vouch for that as well. I've started doing that myself the last few years, and it just, even if it's just like a break away to, I don't know, to either the UK or abroad,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
make decisions for yourself and everything. I'm gonna try abroad next time. You have to send me the details for the place you went because it looked actually really,
Oh
really
yeah.
good.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Happy to.
Oh yeah, no, that'd be great. Looked really nice. So finally today, and I think you probably asked this question already, but this is the final question for a part two guest, which is what makes you happy?
What makes me happy?
Yeah.
What makes me happy? This is a good question because I've been going on this journey and reflecting on this. So, things that make me happy are being with friends and family and I'm going to use this word, but like being silly with them. I've been in situations where you catch up for an hour and you got to rush back because it's the train and you just get the highlights but there's nothing better than like a long weekend where everyone's guards have been dropped and you're just being silly and you are having fun and you're not on a time watch and you're not walking around on eggshells. It's that being your authentic self. It's like having a laugh. It's like exploring all the emotions and just doing that really without judgment, I think is a very much a happy place. Travel is such a happy place for me. I only connect getting on a flight with positive memories and things. I don't think I've ever gone anywhere where I've not been excited to go and I've not felt something. So every time I've been away this year, I've been to Porto, I've been to Lisbon, I've been to New York, I've been to Seville. Every time I come back and I'm like, I need to live abroad. I need to do this. I need, I get so there is something. I don't know if it's like, I put in my headphones and I listen to that like rom-com playlist and I think I'm in my own rom-com. I don't know what it is, but there's just something. I just feel such joy exploring and adventuring around the world for sure,
Mm,
helping people. I think the more you get older, the more you realize that like you can climb the ladder, you can make more money, you can do these things, but there is really nothing nicer than someone feeling like they've been supported or helped by you, and you feeling like you've helped or supported someone else. So
yeah,
I think I talked to a friend recently, and one of my downfalls is definitely that I overgive. And that comes back to a mixture of things about, self-worth and worried that I'm not smart enough, so I overgive in different things and all these different things. But actually, the overgiving comes from the want to. It was interesting when we spoke. I was like, I've got all these ideas and I'm worried I'm letting people down. And she was like, but who are you letting down? And I was like, well, no one, because they don't even know about the ideas. And she was like, so why are you, being hard on yourself? I was like, because I actually really love helping people.
mm,
At the core of what I will always do, there will be something connected to the support of other people because that connection piece is really important. So
mm,
meeting people, learning about stories, hearing stories. It's interesting. I actually spoke to my partner and I said, if we took work out of it, where would we be and what would we do?
mm,
And boiled it down. And I think I would be a podcaster just for joy
mm.
because I love listening to people's stories. I love learning from people. I love the idea of like picking people that I get to learn from and speaking to them. And even though that still sounds a bit worky, it shows you, I guess, a bit about my personality is that it's connection, it's the learning, it's the storytelling, which is obviously just so ingrained in the work that I do. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think being around people would have to be a must, but preferably in a hot country,
Oh yeah,
always.
yeah. Preferably in New York in the summer, but yeah, or a hot country in Europe, whichever ones you fancy. Steph, this has been absolutely fantastic, and I second your comments just there. It's a pleasure to have you on my show of now for the second time. We've still got so many more things to go through in your book. I've got conversations about you talk about money and growth and ask the right time to ask for it, but time will prevent me from asking that today. So we'll definitely continue this in the future. It's been an absolute joy having you back, and I've learned just so much more from you again, just like last time. And yeah, here's to more conversations like this in the future, and to more events and your big surprise, which I'm sure we'll hear more about in due course. But in the meantime, this has been fantastic. Guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very soon. Steffi, just hang on. We'll have a little debrief afterwards just now. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. It's been absolutely fantastic. Stefanie Sword-Williams, thank you so, so much.
Thank you.